While data mining assets left behind on the Bloodborne game disc, we previously made an educated guess that the unused Colossal Snakeball asset was the originally planned encounter to take place in what would eventually become the Shadows of Yharnam arena. At that time, despite missing textures and event scripting, we were able to at least get a vague impression of how this fight might have played out. However, while all of what we saw at that time was based on guesswork and haphazard restorations, let's instead now take a look at the complete, original design for how Bloodborne's Forbidden Woods once ended. First of all, the arena itself was somewhat different at this time, being a much larger, open area, with the fog gate being placed immediately at the bottom of the stairs leading directly into the wider space. In the finished version of Bloodborne, the staircase leads instead into a tighter corridor, funneling us through an array of surrounding and overhead tombstones, with no actual fog gate appearing at first. This results in the retail release having a much smaller space within which to combat the area boss. Comparing the location of the small puddle of water we pass by lets us see specifically how the surrounding layout has changed between versions. The earlier design is simply much more open in all aspects, all of which of course accounts for a fight with the snake ball itself, seen here complete with the original high-resolution texture work, showing an incredible amount of detail across the various heads and writhing mass. Taking a closer look at the snake ball, we can see that it's made up of a number of independent character models, each with their own behavior script. The main enemy is of course the huge entanglement of giant snakes. However, there is also a small group of pale snakes just within reach which act as a kind of weak point and can be targeted individually. In familiar fashion, we can see that the large underground snakes actually already existed at this point in development and will pop out, attacking the player during certain events, just as they would end up doing in the eventual encounter with the Shadows of Yharnam. If we open From Software's model viewing program, we can see that the snake ball has an animation where it buries its head beneath the ground, likely intended to be associated with the other snakes which emerge throughout the arena to attack. Unfortunately, the code for the animation to work this way was never actually completed at any point in development. So with all of this context, let's now take a look at exactly how the entirety of the snake ball boss encounter played out right up until the point where it was cut from the game. Attacking the small white snakes causes the main body to stagger for a moment, which brings the larger heads down within reach of certain weapons. From time to time, the snake ball will spit out clouds of poison, covering a small area. The most interesting aspect of this enemy is that a special interaction between itself and the hunter exists which allows it to swallow the player whole, dealing a huge amount of damage. After the health bar has been depleted to a certain level, the underground snakes will begin to pop out during certain stagger animations. As a whole, the design is absolutely incomplete, with the interplay between the small white snakes and the larger mass being somewhat unintuitive. Many of the animations fail to blend together, while others are missing entirely. A vast array of sound effects that would correlate to attacks and damage were also never implemented. At this point in development, From Software made the decision not to go ahead with this particular boss encounter, and in the end chose instead to have the Shadows of Yharnam appear here. In the meantime though, Snakeball was not at first entirely removed from the game, as there was a point in Bloodborne's development where, under the Blood Moon phase, new enemies would appear scattered all throughout the game world, encouraging the player to revisit previously cleared areas for new challenges. One of these encounters was a simplified version of the Snakeball boss, which would appear in the Firefly pool of the Forbidden Woods if we were to revisit the area after triggering the final moon phase. This version of the encounter abandoned the Pale Snake weak points and underground giant snake attacks. With no boss health bar or fog gates, this simply presented a much more straightforward fight with a large enemy as a surprise for players who further explore the game's third act beyond the otherwise linear path. Of course, shortly after this, the giant snake ball was removed entirely. We were then left with an end to Bloodborne's Forbidden Woods, with which we're all now familiar. The Firefly Pool functioning as a simple junction between paths and a shortcut in the Forbidden Woods, and the snake ball having been replaced by the highly memorable Shadows of Yharnam, an encounter with its own storied development history remaining to be discussed. Thank you for watching. In the next video, we'll talk about how the Shadows of Yharnam changed between their initial implementation through to the version we meet in the final build of Bloodborne. But in the meantime, if you'd like to support the ongoing work you've seen here today, please consider making a once-off donation using the thanks button below this video, or becoming an ongoing supporter by using the join button. You can find more ways to follow and support this work in the description, and either way, thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.